do you have a mom? Are they still here? How about if we go dig up their grave right now? Because I don't believe you. I don't believe you had a mom. Like, do you hear how that sounds?
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Like we don't do those things here. You're very respectful of the dead. Again, Indigenous people always having to prove themselves. When will it be enough? When do we stop? When will you stop asking us to prove who we are? You've tried to eradicate us. You've given the psychological and visible trauma. You have buried babies. You have taken babies, killed them. One lady recently told me to look in the cement walls. That's traumatic for people to know that and understand that. And it doesn't matter how much settlement money there is. Doesn't matter how much money there is. Money won't make that go away.
No.
I will never be able to get away from the fact that our Canadian government human trafficked us.
Welcome to Conversations with Denise. I'm Denise Young, and I have the privilege and honor of chatting with Stephanie and Annika, who is with Positive Pathway. She's the founder and our fearless leader on this, and it's for the 60 Scoop survivors. And in this episode, there's a lot of great nuggets in here, and I just feel anybody who really wants to understand what truth and reconciliation really means beyond checking the box, we go over that, how important having shared lived experiences when you're actually sharing the stories, and also what organizations and individuals, what we can actually do to advocate and support so every voice is heard and acknowledged.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Bazu Anin, Indigenous Stephanie Naka. My name is Stephanie Naka. I'm an Anishinaabe woman from Manitoba, Treaty 2. I didn't have a lot of knowledge about this all my life, so it's actually quite new to me over the last 5 years. So I know you attended one of the conferences and you shared your story, and I believe it was about 2 years ago, about your experience and how you just found out that you were a 60 Scoop survivor. So can you share with everyone just a little bit about what that is, and actually what who makes up like a 60 Scoop survivor as well? Yeah, absolutely. I moved to Kelowna, British Columbia after some trauma had hit my family, and wanted different things, wanted, a different life, wanted to do better, be better. So moved to Kelowna, British Columbia, and I got into finances. So I became a financial broker, and I was also a truck driver at the same time. And then COVID hit. So from there, had to stay at home, and one of the ladies in the office, which we weren't meeting in the office, but we were on Zoom a lot, she said, "Steph, I think you need to look at 60 Scoop again." And she just said it in a way that was really humbling. She was saying it from a caring point of view. So I said, okay, sure, no problem. So I just left it at that. And then I did actually look into it, and then I realized that it was our family, our biological family, and it's what had happened to us. So that's kind of where it had started about 5 years ago. And since then, I didn't want to be a victim or live in that victimology state. I wanted to do something better with it. So I wanted to join a board, for 60 Scoop. I wanted to help other 60 Scoop people because I just didn't want them to feel like how I felt. And I just realize that there was more 60 Scoop people out there, and this feeling that they feel is just, you can't really say what it is. Like, it's traumatic, it's sadness, it's anger, it's a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah.
So I know you're just saying it is hard to define, but if you were to define, like if somebody came up to you and you say, I'm a 60 Scoop survivor, what would you say to them? Like if they said, oh, you know what, I actually don't understand what a 60 Scoop is. What is it?
So I would say, do you know who your parents are? Do you know, they would probably go, yeah, but then they would be thinking of their adoptive parents or their foster parents. I'd be like, no, do you know who your biological parents are? And then this comes where they go, I've never met them. They've passed away. I don't know anything about them or their family or anything. So it's a really hard starting point, but this is just some very basic simples. How old are you? Do you know where you come from? Did you get your adoption file? Everybody has an adoption file. Who gets adopted or is in foster care, there's information within the government, and they do have to ask for that file. So that's kind of the starting point of everybody who is in the system or has been taken or has been fostered or something. There is information on you. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just, this is a conversation you and I had before, where when I shared with a family member about, because, I'm adopted and my brother's adopted, I'm non-Indigenous, my brother's Indigenous.
Yeah.
And I recall my dad saying, well, I didn't take him.
Right.
And
yeah.
What I told him, and because I think this is such an important story to share, but what I shared with my dad, and you can tell me if this was the right response or not, because this is what I truly feel. I said, but Dad, this is the way that the government did it. You would have never known whether it was wrong because you didn't take him. The government took him. Potentially, and I don't even know the full story, so I'm just using this as a hypothetical. So how would you respond in that case?
So with some of the things, I always like to include a little bit of history, and I didn't know it back 5 years ago, but now because I've gone to university and done a little bit of education, I have, graduated as an Indigenous major and don't even know an eighth of Indigenous knowledge, really. But what I do know from the time, and just people that I've talked to, is that the 60 Scoop started in about 1939, so the Métis have said that this is, and some people will say even before that, right up to 1991. When kids were taken back in the day, and Métis have it recorded from about 1939 to about 1991, they wanted to take the Indian out of Canada, right? So there is backdated paperwork. There's like the white paper from Justin Trudeau's father. They have tried and tried and tried to eradicate, even before the Canadian government was here, they still tried to eradicate the Indian out of Canada. And it hasn't happened. Like everything that they have tried, it still has not happened. So, if I was to say something to a 60 Scoop person about this kind of trauma, I would call it a psychological, invisible trauma. Because it comes to us in a way that we can't pinpoint it. It's trauma, we know it's trauma, we feel it's trauma, and it's really hard to move on. But for people who foster us or adopt us, they're never given the full picture, and we know how government is. You're never ever going to get the full picture on a lot of things, right? So I'm not surprised, but it has happened. you know, and the question is, we don't actually know how many 60 Scoop people are out there. But for a government to do this to Canadians and to other human beings and not tell them where this child originates from or what kind of hereditary things that might come out as they grow up. You know, now we have ADHD and you know, all these other acronyms. What was it called back then? I mean, you know?
Yeah, and words are constantly evolving. And knowing your experience too, and kind of bringing that into a organization context too, is what would you hope, like, let's just say, think about yourself, you know, 5 years ago when you were going through all this stuff, as either as an individual or in a formal leadership, what do you feel you would have needed from either your leader or from your peers while you were going through that? Because this is really about also creating that inclusive workspaces and the diversity of individuals, and even other 60 Scoop survivors might have different experiences than you. So how can you, I know it's your shared lived experience, but can you kind of give some feedback on that piece of how do you create those inclusive environments within the organization and within a team environment?
You know, I would suggest having open conversations about it, because you never know what somebody's going through in their life, right? Unless somebody's willing to talk about it. There have been gentlemen just talking to other gentlemen, and the other guy says, yeah, I'm a 60 Scooper as well. And it's like, never knew, never had any idea. And so where was the space for that gentleman to come out and say that he wasn't safe enough until somebody else brought it up, right? So if organizations were really going to help Canadians, then we all have staff meetings, we all have newsletters, we all have things that we do within our organizations. Have a survey maybe make it anonymous, maybe find out what people's frustrations are. You know, there's a lot of things that are going on in the world, and they could really help them by just having open conversations at work or in a community environment, you know, where how can we, let's say as a Ukrainian community, help the Indigenous community, or vice versa, or whichever community, right? How can we help? How can we be open? How can we educate ourselves in 60 Scoop? Because we are the next generation after the Indian residential schools, so yeah.
Yeah, and I have so many questions regarding this, but yeah, and I think another one I had too, I remember, I think this is about, it was probably a week before the last, National Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I was flying, and I was sitting next to this gentleman, and I can't remember how the conversation came up, but we started talking about truth and reconciliation. Okay. And he goes, and I don't know, he didn't know my background or anything, and he's like, can I just be blunt? Because, you know what, something really upsets me about this. And I thought, because it was a white man, right, that it was going to go the other way. And he was extremely supportive. And he said, you know, I don't understand why, he goes, I understand why this is a holiday, but I don't understand why people think it is a holiday. And you know what I mean by that? Yeah, I do. So my question is, and so we had this big conversation, I think it was like an hour flight, that's all we talked about, because we were very frustrated, right? And I just said, and I wore orange purposely, right? Because the thing is, it goes beyond wearing orange. It's what does true, and reconciliation mean? And when we're thinking about September 30th, what would your feedback be on those organizations? Yes, it's a holiday, but what can they actually do where it goes beyond checking the box? Because it shouldn't be just a scene, oh, yay, we have a day off.
It is a day off. It's not a holiday. There was, when you think of all the trauma that Indigenous people went through in those schools, and the trauma of somebody who never met their family in 52 years, where somebody may never ever meet one of their family members, where a 16-day-old baby gets ripped away from their family. That's not a holiday. That is not a holiday. And those are just some of the things that I personally know, from current to all the way back. Mm-hmm. It is not okay. It is not okay to see other people live this way. But if organizations wanted to get involved and they really wanted to educate and they really wanted to help their employees, their community, then reach out to your local Indigenous organization. Maybe there's other Indigenous organizations that are more than just the band. We're everywhere. We have beading, we have skirts, we have all kinds of businesses, you know? Yeah. But as much as you want us to come out as well, it's also a day for us. And we have a lot of knowledge when it comes to this particular day. And I know that people parade, and I know that, you know, they come together in certain places. It's just, if there's 60 Scoop people in your area, see if they would like to share their story. They don't have to, but maybe some of them do want to share. Yeah. And provide a safe space for them to share if they do. I would just be very mindful of like what Indigenous people have gone through. You know, from being the first people here on this land to current.
Yeah, I remember Elder Marion when we had that conference here in Kelowna. That was, you know, time flies. I think it was about 2 years ago-ish.
Yeah.
And I still remember her getting up when she was kind of doing the opening remarks. And I don't remember exact the words she put it, but they were just beautifully said. And I remember her just saying in a soft voice, right? Like, you know what, if we're angry, just let us be. And yes, we need to find a way to move forward, but we're angry and we have a right to be.
Yeah.
And those words have always stuck with me, because I think so many times people, you know, when I'm in organizations doing my training, it's always about this discomfort. And it's okay to be in discomfort. And to me, I just think about, if people want to ask questions about me, I would rather have them ask me than just assume and be in discomfort, right? And I think this kind of ties now to, I guess, another discussion I want to have too. It's about, yes, if an organization, we know some organizations may not want to do anything. We cannot control that.
Absolutely.
And my response always is, but on an individual level, there is impact you can make, and we are all responsible for this. You can't just rely on your HR department or your senior leadership stuff. So what can people be doing on and I'm not going to say daily, right? Because this is not what we're expecting people to do, but what do you feel people can do on I guess on a kind of that micro level, right? Where it doesn't have to be these big grandiose things, but the impact to that one person could have huge implications, like huge, positive implications.
Be authentic. Let's say you're in a family setting, you have children. Let it not even be September 30th, but have a conversation openly in the home about what has happened to Indigenous people in the past. Research yourself. find knowledge. There's knowledge about Indigenous people everywhere. Libraries, museums, the university. I think that, we live in a great place here and there's so much. You could take the kids or the family out and learn about something on a weekend. No, it's going to be an Indigenous weekend. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're just going to go learn everything about Indigenous people. Well, why? Well, because they were the first people here on the land. So we're going to honor them this weekend. And then they're like, oh. So then when September 30th rolls around, it's like, oh, you know what? We went out and did this and this and that, and we went to a Soyuz, and we went to a Indigenous restaurant in Vancouver, or whichever it is, right? So it's supporting Indigenous, not only on September 30th, on Aboriginal Day, and other days that, are pertinent to them. So that's how families can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Kids can also do it. If there is a bunch of kids, and this is like a new generation, they really, they have a voice, and they can use their voice, and they can use it in a proper way. They are the future, and our youth are so very important that they will find facts and bring them home to mom and dad.
Yeah, and when they're educated at a younger age about this too, and it's getting the proper information into schools too. Yeah. And I was recently. I was at they called it a multiculturalism day. Okay. And I was speaking on. It was, they had these little pod discussions, and, I think it was from grade 6 to grade 9. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I love this. Because the grade 8s, they're sassy. They don't care. Like, they will ask you whatever it was. And it was interesting, the questions I was getting from my multicultural family, to my adoption, to, the best question I had was somebody thought, because I was a CEO of company, that they said, are you rich? And they flat out asked. And then we ended up having a whole discussion around financials, and I just say, but that is one of those perfect, times to really start educating, the children, because they're open. They're not like us, where we're a little bit more closed-minded as we age,
right?
And I think, and kind of, I want to hear a little bit more about, your positive pathways, because you have done so much work, and I'm looking to this more in your leadership role. So you started this board. It's supporting, 60 Scoop survivors. And what I appreciate about you, Stephanie, is that you always lead from an authentic perspective, and also that you're not letting, how do I say this, the anger like inside of you, and it doesn't impact your leadership. So what do you feel, I guess, how do you think I don't know if I'm making sense, but how do you, I want to start that over.
Oh, good.
But I guess, as a leader, what do you feel has helped you? Because, sometimes when we're talking about the trauma and the stuff that we've been through, what keeps you going to still show up for the people who are on your board, for the people that are, who are struggling on the street, because you always have that compassion. So how come you feel you have it?
So I'm going to tell you a couple of things here. Okay. So when I started the board in 2024, August of 2024, let's go back a little further. When I found out I was a first 60 Scoop, I wanted to be on a board because I didn't want to stay in the victimology state. I needed to change the pain that I had into power. So I really wanted to lead, but I wasn't sure how. I was very new to this. I needed to learn. So I was on this board for a learning experience, and then I came off that board, and I wanted to go bigger. So I went national. And
Of course you did.
right? So I said, I don't only want to think about myself, but I do want to help other people who have this feeling on the inside. And so the only way that I could think that I could help people is to be able to have this on a national level. Right. So when I first moved to Kelowna, I wanted a better life. I wanted to do better. I wanted to be better. So I've pretty much excelled ever since I've been here. And within the foundation, as women, as mothers, we always put ourselves last. This is very common. So it was very easy for me to do as a mother and a grandmother to be able to put myself behind everybody else who is a 60 scoop and who should be first. You know, when we lead, I feel like we walk with each other, not in front of everybody. And some of the best views is when you're behind them and you can see everybody and you can pinpoint where maybe an area needs more work or where they're excelling and maybe they can help over there, you know. So just to have that perspective of an overview. I've also learned, like, it's just, you can't rush. As a truck driver, I learned this. You cannot rush because if you rush, you get into an accident. So you just slow the pace, you know, and really take a look at what is going around you, you know, and keep that bird's eye view in regards to what is the bigger picture. And I have faulted, Denise. I have made mistakes.
We all have.
I have done it. There have been a few people on the board. I value everyone who has helped progress to where it is now. 18 months strong, and we're not slowing down. Everybody who's on this board is absolutely credible. They bring their own little piece of what adds to what we're trying to do. And when I've met with people from the board, I always look and go and make the correlation of what they're going to add. And if I can't, then I can't. But generally, there's a give and a take, right? So I try to always make that correlation of what can we offer or what can they offer us, you know? And it's not about getting something, it's about sharing information. How can I help you? That's my favorite saying. How can I help you? If you're a 60 scoop, how can I help you? Well, I need counseling, I need this, I need money, I need a place to live, I need healing. Okay? Acknowledging them first off is, you know, to heal. That's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, seeing them for who they are in the moment, whatever that looks
whatever
like.
That looks judgment. Like, right? And I had to go through my own, right? Because, like I said, when I moved to Kelowna, I came from trauma. So it was, you know, working on the mindset. And then it was, you know, you stop the drugs, you stop the drinking, you try and be your authentic self. You go to the gym, you try to eat better. I've gone all the way to Peru and done ayahuasca to help with the intergenerational trauma that's come through me, because through epigenetics we carry it in our DNA. It's a proven fact, scientifically proven. 3 generations. As Indigenous people, we say 7 generations.
Yeah, and I think just taking care of your, you know, physical, mental, like all of those, you know, healthy, it's like you can't take care of others unless you're healthy inside. And I'm going to just squirrel because something came up as you were talking to, and it was something that you and I were just at.
Yeah.
And I know this might be, I guess it's how do you approach this? So usually at these events, because I was going to ask you, what is one small thing that people can start doing today? And I thought right away about land acknowledgements. And you know what I'm going to bring up? And so many organizations now write a script, and it bothers me when they read it out. Or the second thing they'll do is they invite an Indigenous person to do the land acknowledgement. And I had to learn too, and that's something that you never do. You can have an Indigenous, person or elder, open it up, all that stuff, but a land acknowledgement should never be done by an Indigenous person. So you were recently invited to do that, and it's not, at no fault of anybody else's. This is not about shaming or blaming. However, what would your advice be on something like that? Because I wanted to approach it, but I felt really awkward, I'm not gonna lie. And because I knew the intent of why they did it was good, and you didn't want to make them feel I guess, shamed or anything. So what would you suggest? Because to me, you got invited. It shouldn't have been you either correcting that thing. It should be somebody like me who, as a non-Indigenous person, would go to this person and say, hey, did you maybe know this? So what would your feedback, I guess, be on that? Because I'm still sitting with it. I still struggle.
Yeah, of course. And there's a lot of educating that needs to be done around this. Indigenous people know about the land. We're aware.
Yeah, of course you do.
We're aware of the land, and we respect the land, the animals, the water, and people. So I did do it, and it was my first one openly, and this topic came up in university when I was there, and the consensus on the class was people should stop doing it. They missed the boat exactly on what the meaning was, and just like resources, they've overused it. Unless it's done intentionally, because you and I both had that discussion too at when we had the event when I did that International Women's Day event last year, and then we had Jen do the land acknowledgement. If everybody did the land acknowledgement like her, there would be no issues, because she was thoughtful, she did her research, she knew exactly where she was, and then she educated the people in the room, and she also said, and here's a list of resources. So I think if it's done properly, like that, I think it is, but I've heard that time and time again. It's like, if you're going to just read off a script, just don't do it. That's the same as just ticking the box. But I've also heard other Indigenous people have doing land acknowledgements, and the land acknowledgement took 45 minutes. You asked me, this is what a land acknowledgement is. It has to be authentic to the organization, to the person. And I think it's our responsibility as Canadians, and I'm talking from a different perspective, that if we are on this land, then be authentic to yourself. Why are you here? How has being here in Canada helped your family? How has it helped you? Do you have to worry about bombs? No, you don't. Do you have a car? Do you have a home? Do you have a place? How have you given back? And those are some of the hard questions that people just end up putting their head in the sand, and they don't want to talk about it, in someone else's neighborhood. We don't want that here. Don't bring that here. Don't do that here, And it's like, why? There are people, I'm Métis, but I don't practice it. I'm not really Indigenous, just like, it's just a little bit. There's still a lot of stigma and everything that goes on with being Indigenous, and it's far from over. So I'm not sure that I will actually see more change in my lifetime, but I'm very, very hopeful.
Yeah, so another thing that I'm very curious about, Stephanie, is in a lot of the work I do around diversity and inclusion, I get brought in to talk a lot about race, ethnicity, culture, gender, sexual expression, like all of these different pieces. And so I can give the overall terminology on them.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
And when it comes to, say, being a woman and actually my own shared lived experience, of course I'm comfortable with it because I'm in that. But what I'm finding is that a lot of people are sharing stories, or what I feel are speaking on behalf of other people with other identity factors. So for example, I was brought in, this was years, I think this is when I first started my business about 5 years ago, or who knows, it's like we lost a couple times during a couple years during COVID, but I know it was around that time. So, that was maybe longer. Yeah. But anyway, and this person had brought me in and they hired me and they really wanted me to, and I don't remember what it was, and it had something to do with Indigenous people. Okay. And it wasn't like just sharing like overall history or things that I could find, but it was something around the importance of a land acknowledgement. Okay. And as a facilitator, I'm not gonna lie. At first it was like, oh, well, they're gonna pay me money. And then I thought, this is so wrong, because I thought, it should be given to an Indigenous facilitator, not a non-Indigenous facilitator. And I'm not gonna, I go to a lot of Indigenous events and I do a lot of even facilitation in these spaces. And I see this all the time where people are speaking on behalf of Indigenous people, and it bothers me. And so what is, I guess, your perspective on that, and why do you feel, or if you feel, I'm sure you do, that the shared experience is such an important piece if you're going to share the stories?
So Denise, I never thought that I would ever be an expert at anything, but I'm an expert at being a 60 scoop survivor. And I had to spend some time thinking about that. What happened to me as a child, being taken at 3.5 months, the separation between my parents who are married and my 2 older brothers, there's a connection there. And then, the 2 younger brothers being taken. I'm a 60 scoop survivor, yes. I'm also adopted, that's how we connected as well. But don't speak for other people. Just do not. I cannot sit here and tell you what it's like to be a prime minister, because I've never done it.
Oh, I can. Just make it up. Come on.
Well, fake it till you make it is only going to go so far.
Yeah, that's true.
And people they'll start questioning and they will badmouth you, and it's just, I always think getting educated is just, leaves you in a better position, So when it comes to, I like to deal with facts. I like to talk about facts. What year? When were the treaties signed?
That's way over my head. I just want to share stories.
And I deal a lot with facts, and I like facts, and I like to have them. But when you're talking about lived experience, it is not for me to tell you, Denise, that my adoption was better than yours. So when it comes to that, just be mindful of other people. And if you don't know, it's okay to say that you don't know. And it's also okay to say, you know what, I am not a professional speaker, but I know somebody who is, and bring in the person and ask them, Denise, I I have this convention, you know more about EDI, would you be okay to speak at it? I'll just, and just be mindful of everybody else that's around you. If it's a school, let's say, and you want to do something on September 30th, you can't speak for the Indigenous people if you're non-Indigenous at your school. If you're the principal, then bring people in from the community. Help get the message across, the authentic one.
Yeah, and it's amplifying those voices that are usually not invited into the space. And one piece of advice I had, and I can't remember what it was about, but I think I was questioning, and so I called this colleague of mine at the time, and I was really struggling because it's going back to, somebody's going to pay me money, but I feel really awkward doing it because I don't think I should be doing this. And she said it simply, and I always say this: stay in your lane. And it's not about, and then I had this other thing that I wanted to bring up too, is being, sometimes I do a lot of stuff with, as I said, like with Indigenous engagement, but we always bring in, it's done in that respectful way. And I remember having this conversation with I think, she was First Nations, and I was really struggling. She worked for the University of Alberta at the time, and I just flat out asked her, because I remember I was so uncomfortable, and I just said, I said, I'm having a lot of struggles because I'm getting invited into these spaces, and as being a non-Indigenous person, I'm not sure if I should be in this space or not. And she said to me, but Denise, she said, if you are amplifying and you're advocating for us, then you're giving us a voice when so many times we're not at that table. And she said, we actually need more people that are like you, because you are questioning it. So, which is a good thing. You're just not going in there. You're asking. It's almost like that, asking that. And I don't want to say permission, but you know how I am. Like it's just like asking for that advice to say, I'm not sure what to do. And yes, that was uncomfortable for me, but that made me feel better. But then also it is very complex. And it's not even, it's all of these things that we're going through in the world right now. And I think you put it perfectly when I think what you're referring to is just treat people as human beings. And
it's simple, but it's yet so difficult for people to do. When you walk into a room of a white and you don't see an Indigenous person there, you should ask yourself, why are they not here? You should ask yourself, who's not sitting at this table? Who's not in this room? Who's not here that should be here? Is there Indigenous? Is there Ukrainian? What about the German? Being an Indigenous person and being authentic to all human beings is all human beings. And we would hope that other human beings would be like that back to us. And if there's policies and procedures, ask us to be at the table. We have tried so many times. There's so much video on people trying to sit down and talk with the Canadian government. And it's just always a struggle and always a fight. And it just, we're not there. We're not at the table. And we ask why. And it's important that we are.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this stuff ties into just those unconscious biases that we have. And, I'm going to probably talk about it in simplistic, even though I know it's not. However, you think about an organization, because I always question this, because as bias, it's actually human nature. It is ingrained in our minds to have biases. So if you don't look like me, you're automatically not safe. Correct. We will never ever lose that. And then we also have this other thing, this brilliant thing of always need to the right, the need to be right. So you're looking at you're looking at these the leadership teams that are in power, and they're usually mostly white cisgender men. So when they're hiring other people, guess what? They're going to be doing the same thing. Yeah. Are they doing it because they're mean? No, they're not doing it because they're mean. They're doing it because that's who they trust. And I'm not blanketing everybody that way. I'm just saying typically, because the results are there. It says, in terms of leadership positions, it is white men, and then it's white women, and then there's barely any visible minorities in leadership, and I'm talking about senior leadership team here.
Yeah.
And same with boards. And the research has shown that.
Absolutely.
And so how do we, and I'm going to ask you this question but how do we, I guess, start breaking down those barriers and start educating? And do you have even advice on some of that stuff that we can just start breaking down? I know it's a huge question, but what are your thoughts on that?
It's a pretty huge question, and again, I don't know that I would ever see it in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. That's how massive this is when it comes to this.
Yeah.
We may not see it. We can certainly talk about it now. We can be aware of it now. The micro steps, there needs to be a big movement when it comes to Indigenous people. There's so many avenues that this goes on, all the Indigenous people behind bars. Mm-hmm. All the Indigenous people that are not in the government. Mm-hmm. Government rules what goes on here, and it's just, they're going to feel defeated. They're going to feel the defeat. And that's why you have some people in back lanes, and they know the stories. This mm-hmm. isn't something that, Canadians found out about the 215, and that was, pretty heartbreaking. But Indigenous people have already known this story for years. Mm-hmm. And that's already passed down. So trying to get over that, plus trying to lead, plus trying to keep people educated, what are they to do? How much more can they do? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think the important thing, again, it's not on the Indigenous people to make these changes. And I think so many times but sometimes I feel that it is the Indigenous people that are trying to advocate for themselves, trying to do, with your organization you've done, and so many other ones. And it's, I guess, on an everyday basis, what are some of those things that, I guess what I'm trying to ask here is, so somebody like me, I'm aware.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm aware is because my dad was an anthropologist, and he focused on, on Indigenous, the traditional ways and things mm-hmm. like that. So I almost grew up understanding that piece. And then when I was in school, I always did my paper. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was high school, which I'm going, what? And I understand now it's probably because my dad and what he did is why I was so interested. But I remember doing all my papers I did them on residential schooling because it horrified me, and it was just I wanted to learn about that. But not everybody gets that type of upbringing, because it's also about, I think what you said, it's about educating and make sure that we know and children know at a young age. So to me it should be put in the school, the proper information should be taught at a younger age. And I know some schools are actually doing that now, which is great and fantastic. Mm-hmm. However, it's also you still have this bias towards the stuff where people, because I don't know if it's that uncomfortableness, because I think when I go into these spaces, and I'm not talking, I talk about a bunch of different things, I talk about the race, what I was saying earlier, and it's almost the individuals are so uncomfortable, and you try to explain it and say, but this is not you as the individual, this is not you didn't create this. Systems created where we are, but as individuals, you do have the power to make the difference by like exactly what those things are saying, like the education?
I think that's probably it right there, is that people here don't actually realize how much power they actually have. They don't realize how much power they have to help, to change, and to know that they don't have to stay the same. They can do something. Absolutely, people can. And they just need to be empowered to do it. We wouldn't have as much change as Indigenous people have now if we were still listening to their stigmas. There have been so many Indigenous people. I've been sober for 35 years. I've been sober for 20 years. And thousands of people, and they're so proud of it. And they should be, right? Because the stigma for years was, even when I grew up, don't act like an Indian. Okay, all right, no problem. I won't, because I guess it's bad, right? But that was their objective, for 60 Scoop people. We just want to assimilate them to be just like Canada. The 60 Scoop was like what the white paper was trying to push. Assimilate the people, let them pay taxes. It was only after 53 years did I get my status card. 53 years.
Well, you're that old.
Shh.
And what would your response be on this? Because this is another thing that, really frustrates me sometimes. A lot of things frustrate me, Stephanie, I'm not gonna lie. But some of the stuff is, you start talking about, and hopefully this won't be too much of a trigger for you, but I just find, when you're talking about, the residential schools and all of these pieces, and then people start saying, well, that didn't really still happen, or they bring up another culture and say, well, did you know that there was also, this going on in the world, and the deflection. And my response to this, and I don't know if I'm oversimplifying, I said, well, this is one thing you have to remember here. I said, if Canada was not colonized, the culture here would be Indigenous. And, I said, so it's like, and I have to say this, it's like going, because I'm Chinese, I said, it's just like, if I went to China, right, it's just like, they're probably talking about what happened to the Chinese people. I said, so how would it be any different in Canada? Yes, we have a melting pot here, but to me, it's still Indigenous. So what would your response be on that?
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to have found my identity as being Indigenous. That took a long time for me to get. Let's just say Kamloops. We'll just talk about Kamloops. And I have been on the other side and questioned when I had lack of Indigenous knowledge, and questioned, why did Justin Trudeau do this? And why was he so helpful at the 215 so quickly? And people are wanting proof, I want to see a bone. I want to see a bone. I don't believe you until I see a bone. Well, let's just say you were somebody who was wanting that answer. I guess my question would be, do you have a mom? Are they still here? How about if we go dig up their grave right now? Because I don't believe you. I don't believe you had a mom. Like, do you hear how that sounds?
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Like we don't do those things here. You're very respectful of the dead. Again, Indigenous people always having to prove themselves. When will it be enough? When do we stop? When will you stop asking us to prove who we are? You've tried to eradicate us. You've given this psychological invisible trauma. You have buried babies. You have taken babies, killed them. One lady recently told me to look in the cement walls. That's traumatic for people to know that and understand that. And it doesn't matter how much settlement money there is. Doesn't matter how much money there is. Money won't make that go away.
No.
I will never be able to get away from the fact that our Canadian government human trafficked us. When you take somebody else's child and you give them to another non-Indigenous family, or you give them to somebody else without the parents' permission, because you feel that you're doing better, you have your own Epstein files right here in Canada. Like it's just, and it's just okay. It's not okay. You know? It's horrible. So asking people for proof, we're tired. We're tired. But I feel that a lot of Indigenous people are just getting ramped up too.
Yeah, and I've been at a few events lately, and I loved some of the presentations, because it wasn't about, oh, poor us. It was more about, we are, exactly, it's like, you know what, we are strong, we are resilient, and we have to start portraying that piece and taking our identity, taking our culture, taking our traditions, and taking them all back, because we have the power to do this. Because that's what I see too, is that you know, even the way that some things are advertised, it's very still negative. And it's like, no, it's just like, think about, you know, you know, I think we we're talking about this before. It's about reframing everything. I'm just saying, yeah, this crap happened. This does, but, you know, we need to address it. And I think that's where the truth and reconciliation truly comes in, is you want to feel heard, you want to feel seen, and you want to feel valued, and you are, you know, and you want to feel part of the bigger picture, right? Not separated from it.
We're not, we don't want to be individualistic.
Yeah,
we want to have that pain that we have had that's been endured upon us, and we're changing that into power now. And it's not power over people.
No, it's collective power.
It's always a community with Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we fight within ourselves. Well, so does everybody. Fighting is part of communication.
That's fun sometimes.
It's pretty normal. It's when you stop fighting, then we have an issue.
Yeah, that's what I say. When you're complacent, that's when you have something to worry about. When people go silent, then you know people are done. If they're still fighting, that means people still care. Yeah. Well, Stephanie, I just want to say how grateful I am that you came and shared your knowledge, your wisdom, and your experience. I think, I know this conversation is very important to have. And, you know, and it's just everything that you have gone through. And I just want to say that it's extremely appreciative of everything that you are doing for our community, as well as for others. And it's been a privilege talking with you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Miigwech. And absolutely, we hope to share space again in the future.
We will.
Perfect.